the secrets of around CSS backgrounds. Thank you, Nils.
Oh.
Take over, please.
Okay. First of all, hello from me as well, and thank you for joining us here and doing this little experiment of doing a CSS-only meetup. I will now present you my screen and hope this will work. Now still can see at least some of you. That's very nice. So I don't have to speak into a complete black box. I want to give you a very short, and I promise very short introduction about myself so that you know who I am. Well, my name is Nils, and I work at a company called 9 Elements. What you're seeing here right now is our website. We are an agency building digital products, and we are based in Bochum in Germany. And my job there is working as a front-end designer, meaning I do a lot of user interface design, but I'm also quite passionate about HTML and especially CSS. And I've been working with CSS for too many years now. And my kind of goal is always to find a way of closing the gap that I think exists between design and development, and bringing together people from both sides. And I really like the design part that you can do with CSS and the creative stuff that opens up. And I want to show you two of the side projects that I did lately so that you know a little bit more of what I mean when I say all this. First, there was this little border radius generator. I did this together with a colleague called Mirko about 2 years ago. And well, it's just this little tool where you can drag around these points here and create these nice looking organic blobs just by using CSS border radius. And once you like your organic form here, you can copy this and copy this border radius value and paste it into your CSS. Another thing I did earlier this year is this little code pen thing here for diagonal layouts. And this is, shows you a way of creating these layouts with these diagonals in the background, and also gives you a way of calculating the padding that is needed here so that the content is not overlapping these diagonals and everything can be seen. And you can play around with the angle here, make it really huge, but still you see the content gets pushed down and up so that it's always visible. And I think it's a good thing for both designers and developers to see these things, because when you're a designer and you see, okay, it's quite easy to do these organic forms here, then you can use this in your next design and tell your developer friend, hey, I found a way you can implement this quite easily and you don't need any SVG or something, you can just do it. Or maybe you get inspired by these layouts here and say, okay, I can go really high and do something like this. Maybe this could be interesting for some landing page somewhere, something like this. So that you see what is possible, and that both designers and developers are aware of what is possible these days with modern CSS. Today, so this was my introduction. I promised it would be short. Today I want to talk about CSS backgrounds, and I don't have any slides. This will all be live coding, and I'm really nervous about this right now. I will share later this CodePen collection here, where you can find 8 pens. This is the first versions, the ones where I start, and then I made 4 other versions where you can see the final result of what I did, so you can play around with it afterwards. Yeah. And then that's it. Let's start with this first pen here called Gradients. Oh my God. And I didn't want to have this shown first, so that's been okay. The HTML here is nothing fancy. It's just 2 divs, and the second one I just set to display none. So you just see one box here, and This has this little nice thing here called background color blue. This was maybe one of the first things I ever learned about CSS. So you can give something a color and you can give something a background color. But of course, there's much more. And as you can see up here, I want to talk about gradients first. And when CSS gradients were introduced, it was really hard to remember the syntax because it was the time when we had vendor prefixes all over and different browsers had different implementations, and it was really hard to understand it, and you could not really know it by heart. And there were a lot of tools out there where you can just build your gradient and then you copy it and you paste it in your CSS. But these days are, luckily they are over, and now all the major browsers have the same syntax, and it's not too hard. I think it's quite straightforward. And there are some things that are good to know, and I think it's really a good thing if you can write these this syntax by hand. And I will show you how it works. One thing before I start, I did some Sass color variables up here so that I don't have to write these hex codes all the time, and I think it's a little easier to understand that. So let's start. When I want to have a gradient, I type in background image linear gradient, and the easiest thing is just type in 2 colors, pink and blue. And what I now have is a gradient starting with pink in the top and ending with blue in the bottom. And that's the easiest thing I can do. And I will write this a little differently. And I can add more colors to it. I can add yellow. And then I have a 3rd color here. And I don't need to define any stops. Whenever I add more colors, they get distributed evenly across the whole box, which is quite nice. And I can add more colors here. I can add this cyan. And if I wanted to have this with equal stops, I'd have to write something like 33% for this stop and 66% for this stop here. And when I then removed one, I had to change all of this. So just writing colors, comma separated next to each other works perfectly fine. Next thing I can do is I can define an angle. This is in the start, and this one goes from top to bottom. And if I write 45 degrees, it starts from here to there. What I learned today actually is that the default value is 180 degree. I thought the default would be maybe 0 degree, but the default is 180 degree. So now we have it like this again. And if I set it to 0, then it goes from bottom to top. And what I will do is now I want to have it going from left to right. And I already mentioned, and I will take away one of these colors here. I didn't define any stops here, but I can do this, and I can place them just next to the color, and I can use whatever unit I want. And CSS has a lot of units. So for example, I can say 200 pixels. Now you can see the pink color here goes from 0 up to 200 pixels. And then again, the other values are distributed evenly from pink to yellow and then to blue. And it stays at a fixed width here of 200 pixels. If I don't want to have something like, if I don't want to have fixed pixels, I can also use percentages. So now you see the yellow is in the middle because I used 50%. And so in this way, you can mix units however you want. You can use viewport units, character units, pixels, M, rem, whatever you want. But there's one thing where you have to be a little careful, because there may come a point here where 200 pixels is more than 50%. So if I shrink this down, now here's the point where we have the 50% would be somewhere here. And now you get this hard stop over here because 200 pixels is more than 50%. So when you're mixing units, you have to be a little careful about this. And what you can also do is, let's say I want to have something this one here is to be 200 pixels from the left, and I want the blue here in the back, I want to have it 200 pixels from the right. And I can do this by, say, using CSS Calc. And I type in 100% minus 200 pixels. And now I have like 200 pixels here, then the gradient in the middle, and then 200 pixels over here. So if you had some kind of fluid old school layout with a navigation over here and a sidebar over here, you could fill it easily with a background, with a gradient background in the back. Yeah. But you've already seen, and again here, if I make this very small, then you just see in the end the first color stop here, and there's no gradient in the middle. Sometimes this stripe look is exactly what you want. So you're using a gradient, but what you really want to have is not a gradient, but stripes. And I can do this. Let me say I want to start with pink at 25%. And then I repeat this and say, okay, yellow is also starting at 25% and then going up to 50%. Then blue also starting at 50% and going to 75%. And again, the last color, cyan, starting at 75%. This should do it, I hope. No, there's something wrong. Don't know where I made the mistake. Pink, yellow. Okay, so this is what you do when you're live coding.
I think you're missing a parenthesis at the end, that's all.
Oh yeah, thanks a lot. So yeah, now I have this stripe look. And if you're a developer, what you're seeing here, I'm repeating myself quite a lot of times here. I'm writing yellow 2 times, and I also have to write these the position 2 times. And if I want to change this position, or if I want to change the color, I have to change it in 2 places. And well, as we are lazy, we don't want to do this. And there's a little easier way. Instead of writing this starting point here, you can replace it just by typing a 0. You will not change anything here because it's just the same that's going on here. This will be 0 here as well. And yeah, and that's it. So and I will put this up here. So I just have my, and I don't, I think, oh yeah, I can put a 0 here, and then I don't need this one here as well. And there's the comma. Okay. I think this looks much easier because I only have these 4 colors and I have the values here. And if I want to change this to 40%, it works as well. Okay. Next thing, I already talked a little bit of about the angle here, and I want to get a little bit more into detail here. I will change it to 45 degrees. And what CSS is doing here is something that is really quite unique and something that you, in my opinion, cannot do with any graphic program. So you see here, we have these lines here in 45-degree angle, but still the whole gradient is visible. And you also see like this is 25% of the diagonal and this and this and this. And it doesn't only work if you have a square, it works in any dimension that you're using here. And if you wanted to do the same in let's say, Sketch, Figma, or for Photoshop, you cannot do this. It will look differently, and especially doing something like this in Sketch is just horrible. So this is one point where I know you can copy and paste your CSS gradients from your graphical program, but whenever you do this, maybe take a look at the syntax and tweak it a little bit, because more often than not, it will not be the same as it looks in your graphic interface there. What you have in Sketch, for example, is that you can do this diagonally, but then the angle will change once you resize the box. So it will not stay at 45 degrees. You can do this in CSS as well. Instead of doing an angle, I can do something like to bottom left. So now it looks kind of the same. But you see here, when I change this, now it goes from up here to the bottom left corner. And when I change the dimensions here, the angle changes as well. So, but let's switch back to the 45 degrees here. The next thing that I really had to learn the hard way is that what CSS is doing here, it reads background image and it really creates an image, kind of, that is filled with this background. And it is the default here, it's the full size of the container element. So it's an image filled with these stripes at the width and the height of this element. And of course, I can change the width and the height here. I can use background size and set it to 100 pixel by 100 pixels. Now you see this gradient repeated all over again, and I have this little square here, and it's repeated all the time. And I want to do something kind of funny. I want to change this one here back to pink and change it here to 50 by 150. And you can create these little funny looking backgrounds, these patterns. If you're in the industry as long as I've been, you know, back in the 2000s or something, all websites were filled with these subtle backgrounds in gray tones, and it would have been much easier if we had this technique back then. So maybe not in these colors, but 3 different kinds of grays or something would have been really easier. And speaking about these little background lines, there's something else you can do with gradient, and I will show it here. I think many people of you have already seen this linear gradient, but there's also something else that you can use. This is called repeating linear gradient. And I want to take this here first back to the one we had before, pink, blue. And I can change this from linear gradient to repeating linear gradient, and nothing changes because I didn't define any stop here. But as soon as I give a stop to the last value here, let's say I use 20 pixels, then you see the background goes from 0 to 20 pixels and then repeats itself all over again. And this from up here to there. And also this one here, I can use whatever unit I want. I can use % up here. I can use viewport width. So now you will see that it grows or shrinks when I resize this because of the viewport unit in it. And of course, I can also here change the angle. And I can do this hard stop thing that we talked about before, and I will do maybe this one here, do it a little more subtle and do something from CCC. 0 to 10 pixels. For repeating gradients, it's a good thing to start with the 0. I could maybe do a double here 2 times and say, okay. And then I have so. Yeah, and also maybe you remember when these patterns in the background were quite popular, you had to cut out a little piece from your Photoshop document and look that you had this really repeating pattern, and whenever you want to change anything from it, you need to change this little image that you were using. It was really hard. And now if the designer says, no, I want to have a different angle, you can simply change this here. And yeah, again, also here, I could use viewport units again. It's quite nice. And with this one here, for example, the repeating gradients, you can get really creative. You can layer them on top of each other. And I did some experiment here that I want to show you. I made this little single div art. You see it's just one div here, and the rest is CSS. And around here, you see this overlapping gradients. And I used very hard stops for the waffle. And the syrup that flows down has a little softer stops, so it looks like the syrup is covering the waffle while floating down. And this is all gradients. And also, don't ask me about the ribbon. I just wanted to put it there because I can. It doesn't make any sense, but it's also just different CSS backgrounds with a fixed size put up here, and there's a repeating background, and then this is just one color to the other up here. And there's a lot of people doing this, and I always sometimes get the question of, is this really useful? Can I use this? And where can I use this? And maybe you can't at first. And should I use something like this in production? Maybe not. But when you play around with these kind of things, I think you kind of train your mind to come up with solutions that you wouldn't have thought about before. And maybe at some point you have a problem that you need to be solved. And you see, well, I did something for this little waffle thing. Maybe this could help here. And then you have a solution for this. So it's just a little training of creativity and technology coming together. Okay, that was it mostly for gradients, but I want to go to my next one here. And it's, as you can see, also about a gradient, but this time I want to talk about how you can achieve a gradient border in CSS. So when you, for a designer, it's quite nice. Just you have your sketch open, and then you add a border, and you can just add a gradient to this border. In CSS, this is a little harder. There are different techniques on how to achieve this, and I want to show you my favorite technique here. And I will also show you why this is my favorite technique. I will first, I have this box here, and I have added a border radius, because border radius and gradient is something that is a little hard to do. And I will start by adding a border. Border 1M solid, and let's say yellow. So. Oh, ich habe solid geschrieben. Oh, sorry, I wrote solid instead of solid. Now I have this yellow border around here. So far, so good. And I will change this now and make this border a little transparent by using RGBH value, 255, 255, 255. So, and now what you see what's happening here, this border, this gradient here, I told you it's an image, and this image is repeating itself here. You see this one here is a little blue because the background here is repeated over here, and you see it in the border. And I want to fix this because we are getting to the solution bit by bit, and I want this gradient not to go over here, but not to stop here, but go all the way up to the background here, to the border. First, what I did over the last years was changing the background size to something with calc 100% plus 2 times the border width. But this is a little complicated. I can do this much easier. There's a property called background origin, and this can be set to border box. You may know border box from box sizing border box. We have the values border box, padding box, and content box. The border box starts outside of the border. The padding box is here, that's the default, and the content box would be inside the padding also. So the padding is also subtracted from this. So now I have my my background going over here inside the border. This is quite nice. What I now need to do is just fill this thing here in the inside so that it looks like it was the background. And I will do this by adding another gradient on top of this. So I have this one here, linear gradient, and I'll type in my background color 2 times. So now it overlays the other one. You can layer many gradients on top of each other. What you have to know is that the first one will be the one on top. This was a little counterintuitive to me. I thought the last one would be the one that is on top, but it's exactly the opposite. And now both gradients here, both images kind of have the same background origin. And I don't want this to be, I only want the second one to be at the origin of border box. The first one, I want to be at the default, which is, no, it's not content, it's padding box. And I have this comma here. And it's not doing, oh, yeah. It's not doing anything. What I want to do now is I want to stop the repeat. And now you can see here we have this, and you have these tiny corners in here. These are not too nice. This is the only thing that is not looking so good here. If I change this border here to be completely transparent, so we're nearly there, but I want to have these corners here smooth as well. And let's admit some more people coming in. There's another property that I didn't know for quite a long time, and this is called background clip. And I'll set this to the same. So I have this one here as padding box and the other one at border box. And now finally the upper gradient here, the image gets clipped at the padding box, and so this gets these rounded nice corners here. And I said this is my favorite approach of doing this, and it is my favorite approach because I don't need the repeat thing here anymore because it's clipped now. You have these 3 values here, but apart from this, I can change the border as I would with any solid color. So if I want to change this from 1 to maybe just 1 pixel, I can do this, or to 5 pixels. And if I want to change the border radius, I can do this as if it was just a solid color. And this is quite nice. The only downside here, and this can get really a little ugly, is that I have to fill this box here with the same color as the background. There are also techniques that you can use if you want to have it on a not solid color in the background, but this would be too much here. But if you have questions for this, I have a code plan how you can achieve this. But yeah, it's a little ugly. It's a bit of a hack. Okay, that's it for this one here. I also added something else here, but I think we don't have the time. Let's maybe I can just do this, show you this. I will not talk much about it. Border and solid. Background. So okay, if you have something like this, and this style was kind of famous when you have these little zooming things on a layout. So you have the layout in small in the background, and then you zoom in on some details. Then you sometimes have these little borders here that are over this background thing. And if you don't want to use some inset box shadow for this, you can also do this with a border, but then you need the background origin to be border box as well, so that it is not cropped here and it doesn't stop where the border starts. Okay, so that's it for on the border box crop and origin stuff. Let's now go over to Inline SVG. And now let's see, I forgot to open it. Yeah, okay. I really like SVG, and I think I know SVG is a little terrifying to some people because well, it has its own values and properties, and it's not too hard and not too easy to understand. But if you are familiar with it, you can do really great things. And I was really, it was a little mind-blowing experience for me when I first saw this. And I have to copy this from down here, what I'm going to do right now, because I don't know the syntax by heart. You can inline SVGs as a background image. So it's like base 64 encoding, but you have your SVG code right there. So I have this one here, and I have these opening and closing SVG tags here. And now I will open up some SVG that I forgot to do before. And I cannot start my Visual Studio Code now right now because Command and 0 is not working. Oh, that's perfect. Well, I'll do something else. Let's go over here and use this. I will do something like this. You should optimize your SVG anyway. So I have this little thing here, and I have my my SVG code, which looks like this. And I highly recommend that you have a very clean code here. And it's also a good thing when you have your colors somewhere in the front. And I will show you later why this is. So I will copy this one here and go back over here and insert it here. And nothing is happening. This is because you cannot place the full code here. Some things have to be encoded, and this is mainly this little hash here. And instead of this, you have to write %23. And now, yeah, I have my smiley poo here. And this is just SVG code as a background image here, and it's just here, and I can edit it. If I want to, for example, change the tongue color down here, which is this one here, I can change it, and it will be a little more pink here. For example, if I have something like background size 100%, 100%. What SVG does normally is not, I had it up here. Oh, this is interesting. This seems to behave differently in Chrome than it does in Firefox. Because normally I would have to add preserve aspect ratio none up here. Or did I do it somewhere? No, I think I did not. Oh. Now I'm confused, really. So this is what should happen, yeah. Let's try something. Oh, okay. I'm sorry about this. This normally worked just maybe this afternoon, and now because I'm doing this talk, it's not working anymore. But anyway, you can have your SVGs in here, and you can do some changes, maybe add some stroke effects or whatever, or change the size of a circle up here. And I wouldn't probably use it for something as complicated as this little smiley poo here. But if you have, let's say you have a little triangle next to a select box that you want to have, or just maybe something that is not even an icon, but just, as I said, a little triangle, circle, some dotted line somewhere, you can enter it right there, and you don't have any file requests. You just have your SVG code ready here. One thing needs to be said here. writing it this way only works when you have a preprocessor here. I'm using SCSS. If you don't have this, everything has to be in one line. So if I use at the compile, look at the compiled CSS up here, you see it's all in one line here. And if you have this and the SVG is too complicated, maybe it's not that useful anymore. Yeah, that's it about the inline SVG, which brings me, you see now the lections are getting shorter and shorter, which brings me to my last example here, and this is called position and repeat. And here, I don't have SCSS enabled here anymore. I will tell you later why this is, but I still have my little smiley poo here. And I want to talk a little, in the end, talk a little bit about position and repeat. Background position and background repeat. And to show you this, I will first set background repeat to no repeat. So the smiley poo is not repeating anymore. And I set my background size to 13 EM. So now the little smiley poo is up here in the top left corner. And I can change this by using background position. And I can do something like bottom right or bottom center. I can also use, again, different kinds of values. Let's say I want to have it like 200 pixels from the left and only 50 pixels from the top. So now it's there. And I can also use percentages here again. One thing that you may keep in mind here is this doesn't work as position absolute. 50% works. If you have positioned something absolute, the top left corner is positioned at the center here. If I use 50% here, the center is in the center. And if I, again, then use 0%, it's in the left. Whereas 100% doesn't push this out of the viewport here. It makes sure it's on the right side. So this is, yeah, if you think about position, this is it can be really a little confusing here. And I can kind of position something from the right here by using 80%. But what I think many people don't know is that you can also position this little thing here from the right and from the bottom by writing something like this. Right, let's use 150 pixel, bottom 50 pixels. Oh. So the syntax confuses me a little because there's no comma in here. You just type in this right 150 pixels, bottom 50 pixels. But it needs to be like this because as soon as I had a comma in there, it would be the syntax for any other multiple backgrounds. So it's just these values next to each other. And now you can see it stays in the bottom right corner. And as we are coming slowly to the end, I want to give you some little advanced stuff that you can do nowadays. Like I think a month ago, Firefox was the last major browser to introduce MinMax and clamp. So I see if I make this window here smaller, at some point I cannot see this little smiley poo. And this is sad because I want to see it. So I can do something here from the right. I say min 150 pixels, comma 100%. So this min function, it tells you use the smaller one if it's 150 pixels, but if 100% is smaller than 150 pixels, please stay there. And you see, it works. But again, if I make it a little more smaller here, it goes away here. And this is, again, sad. And I can use the same for the background size. I can use min 13 pixels, 100%. Let's say maybe we have like a little bigger, let's say 16. So now first it goes over there, and then it shrinks down, and I can see the background all the time, and it stays in the right bottom corner as long as possible. Yay, really like that. And well, you can use this min functions now for kind of everything, like min padding, something like this, or min font size. This is min and max font size. This is maybe one of the greatest things, or if you have this repeating grid. So it's really useful. But, and this is the case why I turned off my SCSS up here, if you use it and have SCSS enabled here, at least CodePen will throw you an error because there are already min and max functions in SCSS, and it cannot handle this if there's mixed values in it. So I don't know a good solution for this right now, but this is why I have only pure CSS turned on here. So coming to the end here, what's missing, I'll do just leave the size in here, is the background repeat thing. And I think maybe if you're a little familiar with CSS, you know you have a no repeat, and then you have repeat, which is the default value. It repeats itself. Yay, many smiley poos. You can use repeat Y, having it only repeating on this axis here, and you also have repeat X, so doing the same. But what I think many people don't know is that there are two other values that can be used for the background repeat property. And the first one here is space. Space makes sure that it is repeated in both sides, but it's not cropped at any point. And you see, if I make this grow and shrink, they get distributed very nicely. It's something like if you are using Flexbox and you have justify content space between, I think it is. Then you have the space here in between, and as soon as there's enough space to put in another smiley poo, it shows up. Same here for the vertical one here. And the other one is round. This is also quite interesting, because if you're using round, the background size is rounded up and down. So I have a lot of smiley poos here, and you can see they are growing a little, and then they're growing again, and I always have them. And now, because I still have my background size here set to a minimum of 100%, you see it shrinks down, and we get more and more of them coming up here. Again, something where you say, okay, where is this really useful? But you could say, for example, if you have some kind of, let's say, some kind of skyline thing or something that you have as a divider, or you have some wavy background and you don't want it to be cut off at some point, you can use this one. Or you have a pattern gradient and you don't want it to be cut off at the right and left corner, then you can use this very nicely. And you can also, if you say, okay, I want to still have it here, but I don't want it to be repeated in the y-axis. There is a, I think, common mistake. You say, okay, I don't want to have it, so I have my x-axis, which is here, and I can say no repeat up here. So I only have it for the x. Bam, bam, bam. And you have to keep in mind that when you want to have round on the x-axis, but you want to have the normal repeating behavior on the y-axis, you cannot do something like, or you mustn't do repeat y here. Because, so you see it fails and it doesn't do anything. Because if I write two values, I'm already saying, okay, this is the one for the x-axis and this is the one for the y-axis. And it kind of doesn't make sense to say repeat y on the y-axis. So the syntax here would only be repeat. So now you see you have the round thing that is happening on the x-axis, and you have the normal repeating here on the y-axis. And I will change this view to a full page view. Oh, I have to save this first. No, then I don't do this. Just having a lot of smiley poos appear. And yeah, now I've reached the end of my talk, and I'm finished with these, finishing with these lots of nice smiley poos here. I hope I said something useful for you. And I saw there was quite a little bit going on in the chat. I don't know if there are any questions, but I think, Christian, you maybe know something more about it.